A silent anomaly is unfolding worldwide, and it refuses explanation. 10 terrifying, unexplained mysteries emerge with impossible timing, distorting records, memories, and certainty itself. Experts disagree violently, yet identical traces keep appearing. If patterns are real, they suggest something watching from beyond perception, waiting for recognition before revealing anything further. As the echoes of ancient stone circles fade into silence, our journey leads south to a sun-baked plateau in southeastern Spain. Here, overlooking the dry valleys of Almeria, the remains of Los Millares rise from the landscape with quiet determination. Time has softened their edges, but even after more than 4,000 years, the scale of these fortifications still commands attention. Thick stone walls trace the contours of the hill. Circular towers stand in silent rows. Deep ditches carve through the earth as though anticipating an enemy that history has long forgotten. At first glance, Los Millares appears to be an ordinary prehistoric settlement. But the closer archaeologists examined the site, the more extraordinary it became. Dating to around 3,200 to 2,300 BC, it belonged to one of the most sophisticated communities of the Copper Age in Western Europe. Hundreds, perhaps over 1,000 people, once lived within its protective walls. Outside the settlement stretched an immense cemetery containing dozens of large collective tombs built from carefully arranged stone. Together, the settlement and its necropolis reveal a society that was organized, technically skilled, and remarkably advanced for its time. Yet one question continues to dominate every discussion of Los Millares. Why would a community from this distant era construct defenses on such an astonishing scale? The settlement was surrounded by multiple concentric walls reinforced with towers. Beyond these stood a chain of smaller forts positioned across the surrounding hills, almost like an early warning system watching every possible approach. The layout suggests careful planning rather than gradual expansion. Every wall, every tower, and every defensive position seems to have been placed with deliberate purpose. The conventional explanation is straightforward. Archaeologists believe Los Millares flourished during a period of increasing competition over valuable resources. Copper was becoming one of humanity's most sought-after materials, and nearby mines offered wealth that neighboring groups may have wished to control. As trade networks expanded across the Iberian Peninsula and beyond, prosperity may also have attracted conflict. Defensive architecture, according to this view, was simply the practical response of a community protecting its people, its resources, and its future. Evidence supports this interpretation. Excavations have uncovered copper workshops, smelting areas, tools, and weapons. Imported materials such as ivory and ostrich eggshell suggest that Los Millares participated in trade stretching surprisingly far across the ancient world. Such wealth would naturally have required protection, and yet some aspects remain difficult to explain. The fortifications appear almost excessive when compared to many other settlements from the same period. Some researchers have questioned whether the outer forts were occupied continuously or served additional purposes beyond defense. Why invest so much labor into structures that demanded enormous amounts of stone, planning, and manpower? Was the threat truly constant? Or did these walls represent something more than military necessity? Another possibility shifts the focus from warfare to social organization. Perhaps the walls projected power rather than merely resisting attack. Monumental construction often serves as a symbol of authority. The ability to mobilize hundreds of workers, quarry stone, and maintain complex defenses may have reinforced the status of local leaders. In this view, the fortifications were not simply barriers against outsiders, but visible reminders to everyone inside of an emerging social order. Others look beyond practical explanations altogether. A handful of independent researchers have suggested that the unusual arrangement of the surrounding forts may have carried symbolic or even astronomical significance. They point to patterns in the landscape, proposing that certain structures aligned with seasonal events or sacred directions. These ideas remain speculative, and no clear archaeological evidence has confirmed intentional celestial planning. Still, the possibility invites reflection. Throughout prehistory, practical engineering and spiritual belief were often deeply intertwined. There are even broader theories proposing that Los Malares was part of a much larger network of sophisticated Copper Age societies that exchanged not only materials but architectural knowledge across vast distances. Similar defensive features appear at sites hundreds of miles away, raising questions about how ideas traveled long before written records existed. Were these communities independently solving the same problems, or were they connected through forgotten routes and traditions that have left only faint traces behind? Walking through Los Malares today, the silence feels almost unnatural. The towers no longer watch approaching strangers. The workshops no longer glow with molten copper. Wind moves gently through broken walls where families once lived beneath the constant awareness that something beyond the horizon mattered enough to prepare for. Whether those massive fortifications stood against real armies, displayed political power, marked sacred landscapes, or served several purposes at once, may never be known with certainty. Stone preserves structure far better than intention. And so the walls remain, asking the same quiet question they have posed for thousands of years. What kind of world required defenses this extraordinary, and how much of that forgotten story still lies buried beneath the hills? From walls that guarded the living, our path now turns toward a mountain where ancient people may have watched the heavens themselves. Here, the mysteries are not built around towering fortifications or hidden tombs, but around the silent rhythm of the sun, the moon, and the stars. High above the surrounding valleys of northeastern North Macedonia, the volcanic peak of Kokino rises from the rugged landscape like the remains of a forgotten world. Dark volcanic rock forms jagged terraces overlooking miles of rolling hills, where morning mist lingers before surrendering to the daylight. At first glance, the summit appears almost untouched, a scattering of natural stone formations shaped by fire, weather, and countless centuries. But among these rocks are carefully carved seats, narrow stone markers, and unusual notches that seem almost too deliberate to be accidents of nature. Standing here at sunrise, it becomes easy to understand why this place has captured the imagination of archaeologists, astronomers, and mystery seekers alike. The horizon stretches uninterrupted in nearly every direction. The changing seasons unfold against distant mountain ranges with remarkable clarity. It is a place where the movements of the sky feel impossible to ignore. Kokino is generally dated to the Bronze Age, with evidence suggesting that people occupied and used the site around 1800 to 1200 BC. Archaeological excavations have uncovered pottery, stone tools, fragments of ceramic vessels, and traces of ritual activity that firmly establish the site's ancient origins. Yet despite these discoveries, one question continues to dominate discussions surrounding Kokino. Was this mountain truly an observatory? The idea gained international attention after researchers proposed that several carved stone markers aligned with the rising positions of the sun during the summer and winter solstices, as well as the spring and autumn equinoxes. Certain rock notches appear to frame the sunrise on these significant days, allowing an observer seated in carefully carved stone thrones to identify key moments in the solar calendar. If intentional, such knowledge would have carried enormous importance. Long before written calendars existed, understanding the changing seasons could determine when crops should be planted, when livestock should be moved, and when ceremonial gatherings should take place. The sky served as humanity's oldest clock, and many ancient civilizations devoted extraordinary effort to tracking its predictable cycles. At Kokino, several stone seats overlook the eastern horizon. One in particular has often been described as a throne because of its commanding position. Was it simply a convenient place to observe the sunrise, or was it reserved for a leader, a priest, or someone entrusted with interpreting the heavens? No written record survives to answer that question. Supporters of the observatory interpretation point to the apparent precision of several alignments. The carved markers do not seem randomly placed. Instead, they correspond closely with the positions where the sun rises during different times of the year. Some researchers have also suggested that the site may have been used to observe the full moon under specific astronomical conditions, allowing Bronze Age observers to monitor longer lunar cycles. These interpretations fit comfortably within what is already known about prehistoric societies. Across Europe and beyond, many ancient communities incorporated astronomical knowledge into their monuments, temples, and ceremonial spaces. Rather than viewing the sky as separate from daily life, they understood it as an essential guide governing agriculture, ritual, and survival itself. Yet Kokino remains unusually difficult to interpret. As our eyes leave the ancient sky watchers of Kokino behind, another landscape quietly emerges, one where the mysteries are buried not among the stars, but beneath layers of earth and stone. Here, in the peaceful countryside of western France, time seems to move more slowly. Gentle hills roll across the horizon, fields sway with the changing seasons, and beneath the calm surface lies one of Europe's oldest and most remarkable monumental burial complexes. The tumulus of Bougon does not announce itself with towering pyramids or colossal temples. Instead, 6 large earthen mounds rise almost naturally from the landscape, blending so completely into their surroundings that an unsuspecting traveler might mistake them for ordinary hills. Yet hidden beneath these grassy mounds are carefully engineered stone chambers built thousands of years before the Egyptian pyramids reached toward the sky. Walking among the tumuli today is an unusual experience. The silence feels ancient. Massive limestone slabs form narrow passages leading into dark burial chambers, where sunlight reaches only briefly before fading into shadow. Every stone seems deliberately placed. Every corridor hints at careful planning. It is difficult to stand inside these chambers without wondering how people living more than 6,000 years ago managed to construct monuments of such remarkable complexity. Archaeologists date the earliest structures at Bougon to around 4,700 BC, making them among the oldest surviving monumental tombs in Europe. Construction continued over many centuries, with new chambers and mounds added as generations passed. Rather than representing a single building project, Bougon appears to tell the story of an evolving community whose traditions endured for nearly 1,000 years. Each tumulus differs from the others. Some are circular. Others stretch into elongated shapes. Several contain multiple burial chambers connected by stone passages. The architecture varies so noticeably that researchers believe different groups, changing customs, or evolving engineering techniques influence their construction over time. Yet despite these differences, a shared purpose seems to unite them. These were places built not merely to bury the dead, but to preserve memory. Excavations have uncovered human skeletons, polished stone axes, pottery fragments, beads crafted from shells brought from distant coastlines, animal bones, and ornaments fashioned from carefully selected materials. Many of these objects were placed beside the deceased, suggesting that death was viewed not simply as an ending, but as part of a larger journey. The effort invested in constructing these monuments is astonishing. Some of the largest limestone blocks weigh many tons. They were quarried, transported, positioned, and balanced with extraordinary precision, despite the complete absence of metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or advanced machinery. The builders relied on stone implements, wooden sledges, ropes made from plant fibers, and human determination. Modern experiments have demonstrated that moving stones of this size is possible using prehistoric technology. Teams employing replicas of ancient tools have successfully transported heavy blocks through coordinated labor, patience, and ingenious engineering. Even so, possibility does not diminish the achievement. How were entire communities organized to undertake projects lasting decades? Who directed the work? How did knowledge of construction techniques survive across so many generations without written language? The stones themselves remain silent. One of the most fascinating aspects of Bougon is the level of architectural planning visible throughout the complex. Many chambers use massive capstones resting upon carefully fitted upright slabs. Weight is distributed with surprising sophistication. Entrances remain stable after thousands of years despite seasonal changes, shifting soil, and countless storms. These are not crude shelters assembled through trial and error. They reveal builders who understood balance, structural pressure, and the properties of stone through careful observation and accumulated experience. For mainstream archaeology, the explanation reflects the gradual development of Neolithic societies. Agriculture had transformed human life. Permanent settlements allowed populations to grow. Communities became increasingly organized, making it possible to devote labor toward monumental projects that honored ancestors, reinforced shared identity, and strengthened social cohesion. The tombs, according to this view, served as sacred places where generations remained connected through ritual. The dead continued to influence the living, and the monuments themselves became enduring symbols of communal memory. This interpretation fits comfortably with discoveries across Atlantic Europe, where other megalithic tombs share similar characteristics. Yet Bougon possesses features that continue to invite deeper questions. Not every burial chamber contains the same number of individuals. Some hold only a handful of remains despite their immense size. Others appear to have been reopened repeatedly over centuries, with older burials carefully rearranged to make room for new ones. Why were certain individuals granted burial within these extraordinary monuments, while others were not? Were these the resting places of powerful leaders, religious specialists, influential family lineages? Or did admission depend upon traditions that modern archaeology has yet to recognize? No surviving inscription explains the rules. Another puzzle concerns the transportation of the stone itself. Although nearby quarries supplied much of the limestone, several blocks appear to have traveled considerable distances. Moving such enormous weights across uneven terrain would have required detailed planning, coordinated manpower, and perhaps seasonal timing that took advantage of weather conditions. Some researchers suggest that construction itself may have become a ceremonial event. Rather than simply building tombs, entire communities may have gathered periodically to transport stones, share food, exchange goods, arrange marriages, and renew social bonds. In this sense, the monuments represented not only the dead, but the living cooperation required to create them. The tombs may have been built as much through ritual as through engineering. Then there is the question of orientation. Several chambers appear aligned toward particular directions, and researchers have long examined whether these orientations correspond to the rising sun during important times of the year. Certain entrances seem to welcome sunlight under specific seasonal conditions, while others remain permanently shaded. The evidence remains debated. Some archaeologists argue that these alignments were intentional, connecting the cycle of human life with the annual journey of the sun. Others caution that irregular terrain and repeated rebuilding make precise astronomical interpretations difficult. Still, it is impossible to ignore how often prehistoric monuments across Europe seem to acknowledge the movements of the heavens. For people whose lives depended upon seasonal rhythms, the boundary between astronomy and spirituality may scarcely have existed. Over time, more speculative interpretations have emerged. Some independent researchers propose that Bougon formed part of a vast prehistoric ceremonial network extending across Western Europe. According to this idea, communities separated by hundreds of miles shared architectural traditions, religious beliefs, and symbolic knowledge over many centuries. Similar burial monuments appear in Brittany, Ireland, Britain, Portugal, and elsewhere along the Atlantic coast. Were these merely parallel cultural developments? Or did forgotten roots carry ideas farther than historians once imagined? The remarkable similarities continue to provoke discussion. Others focus on the builders themselves. The sophistication of Bougon has occasionally inspired claims that Neolithic societies possessed organizational abilities far exceeding conventional assumptions. They argue that coordinating such immense construction projects required advanced systems of communication, leadership, and specialized craftsmanship. Mainstream archaeology generally agrees that prehistoric communities were highly capable without requiring lost civilizations or mysterious outside influences. Human ingenuity alone, developed gradually over generations, provides a convincing explanation for much of what survives at Bougon. Yet acknowledging human capability does not eliminate every mystery. Knowledge accumulated over centuries can disappear just as completely as written records. Among the more speculative theories are suggestions that certain proportions within the tombs reflect sacred geometry or symbolic mathematics now forgotten. A few researchers have attempted to identify recurring numerical relationships between chamber dimensions, passage lengths, and mound layouts. To date, no consensus supports these interpretations. Even so, ancient builders frequently blended symbolism with practicality. A structure designed for burial could also communicate religious ideas through proportion, orientation, and spatial arrangement in ways that remain invisible to modern observers. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how the tombs were built, but why they continued to matter for so long. Generation after generation returned to these same mounds. They repaired them, expanded them, opened them again, placed new burials beside ancient ancestors whose names had likely already been forgotten. What compelled communities to maintain such enduring relationships with these monuments across centuries? The answer may lie in something impossible to excavate. Memory. To prehistoric societies without written histories, monumental architecture may have served as a living archive. Every stone carried inherited meaning. Every ceremony renewed connections reaching backward through countless generations. The landscape itself became history. Today, visitors enter chambers once reserved for the dead, illuminating them with electric lights unimaginable to their builders. The massive capstones remain firmly balanced overhead, exactly as they did thousands of years ago. Outside, grass grows quietly across the ancient mounds, while birds circle above fields that have witnessed the passing of civilizations. The people who constructed Bougon left behind no names, no written language, and no explanation for the beliefs that inspired such extraordinary effort. They entrusted their story entirely to stone, and perhaps that is why the site continues to fascinate us. Every corridor invites another question. Every burial chamber offers another silence waiting to be interpreted. Were these monuments simply tombs, or were they gateways between generations? Did they honor powerful individuals, entire communities, or beliefs now impossible to recover? And beneath the earth that has protected these structures for more than 6 millennia, could there still be chambers untouched, artifacts undiscovered, or clues capable of reshaping everything we think we know about Europe's earliest monument builders? If the tumulus of Bougon preserved the memories of a single ancient community, our journey now carries us farther west, where another monument raises even deeper questions about the earliest builders of Europe. Along the rugged coastline of Brittany, overlooking the quiet waters of the Bay of Morlaix, stands a structure so old that it predates Stonehenge by nearly 2,000 years, and the Great Pyramid of Giza by more than a millennium. It is a place where stone, sea, and silence have shared the same conversation for over 6,000 years. From a distance, the cairn of Barnenez resembles a long, grass-covered ridge resting peacefully above the coast. Wind sweeps across its weathered stones, carrying the scent of salt from the Atlantic Ocean. Seabirds circle overhead, while waves break gently against the rocky shoreline below. Nothing about the landscape feels hurried. Time itself seems to slow here, as though the monument exists outside the ordinary rhythm of history. Only when standing beside it does its true scale become apparent. Stretching more than 70 meters in length and rising several meters high, Barnenez is one of the largest megalithic mausoleums ever constructed during the Neolithic period. Beneath its enormous mound lie 11 separate passage graves, each leading through narrow stone corridors into carefully built burial chambers. Thousands upon thousands of stones, weighing an estimated 13,000 to 14,000 tons in total, were gathered, transported, and assembled with astonishing precision around 4,800 BC, with additional construction continuing for centuries afterward. Long before cities emerged, long before bronze transformed human civilization, long before written language appeared in Western Europe, The people who built Barnenez left behind no names, no written records, and no explanation of what inspired such extraordinary effort. Yet the monument still stands. Archaeologists believe the cairn was built in at least two major construction phases. The earliest builders created a smaller monument containing several chambers. Generations later, descendants or perhaps an entirely different community expanded the structure, enclosing the original monument beneath an even larger outer shell while adding new passage graves of their own. This decision alone raises fascinating questions. Why preserve the earlier monument instead of replacing it? Why invest enormous resources to surround an existing tomb rather than constructing a completely new one elsewhere? The expansion suggests continuity rather than abandonment. Whatever Barnenez represented, its significance endured across many generations. Each chamber possesses its own subtle personality. Some corridors are long and straight, while others gently curve before reaching their destinations. Massive granite and dolerite slabs support equally impressive capstones overhead. Certain stones bear engraved symbols that remain among the site's greatest enigmas. Simple geometric patterns appear alongside shapes interpreted as bows, axes, snakes, waves, or perhaps even stylized human figures. Their true meanings remain uncertain. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, these carvings belong to a symbolic tradition that has never been deciphered because no accompanying written language exists to explain them. Were these decorations merely artistic? Did they identify particular families? Were they sacred symbols understood only by religious specialists? Or were they visual expressions of stories now permanently lost to time? Every interpretation remains tentative. The carvings seem almost frustratingly close to communication. They speak in a language humanity no longer understands. Excavations inside the chambers uncovered pottery, polished stone axes, flint tools, beads, and human remains. Like many Neolithic tombs, Barnenez clearly served as a burial monument. Yet the burials themselves reveal only part of the site's purpose. Monuments of this scale rarely exist solely for practical reasons. Constructing Barnenez would have demanded extraordinary coordination. Estimates suggest that hundreds of workers participated over many years, quarrying stone from nearby outcrops, transporting immense blocks across uneven ground, shaping passageways, and carefully stacking countless smaller stones to create the massive cairn. Without metal tools, without wheeled vehicles, without beasts of burden capable of carrying heavy loads. Modern archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated that prehistoric engineering made such achievements entirely possible through teamwork, wooden sledges, rollers, ropes, and carefully planned labor. Experimental archaeologists have successfully recreated many of these techniques using authentic materials. Still, possibility does not erase wonder. How did communities sustain such long-term projects while continuing to farm, hunt, and care for their families? How were construction methods taught with enough consistency that later generations could expand the monument without compromising its stability? Who organized the work? Who decided where each chamber should be placed? These questions remain largely unanswered. The location itself may provide important clues. Barnenez overlooks the sea from a commanding position. Today, the coastline appears peaceful, but thousands of years ago, sea levels and surrounding landscapes looked somewhat different. Even so, the monument would have remained highly visible to anyone approaching by water or traveling through the surrounding region. Some archaeologists suggest the cairn functioned not only as a cemetery, but also as a powerful territorial marker. Its immense size proclaimed the presence, stability, and identity of the community that built it. In an age before written borders, monumental architecture could communicate permanence more effectively than words ever could. Others emphasize its ceremonial role. Repeated visits to the tombs may have strengthened social bonds between generations. Seasonal rituals, communal feasts, and ancestor ceremonies could have transformed Barnenez into far more than a resting place for the dead. It may have been the spiritual heart of an entire landscape. This interpretation gains support from similar megalithic monuments scattered across Brittany and the Atlantic coast. Dolmens, standing stones, passage graves, and long cairns appear throughout the region, suggesting that Neolithic communities shared architectural traditions and religious beliefs over considerable distances. How those ideas spread remains another mystery. Trade undoubtedly connected prehistoric Europe. Polished stone axes from distant quarries traveled hundreds of miles. Decorative shells crossed coastlines. Communities exchanged materials, techniques, and perhaps stories. Could the knowledge required to build Barnenez have spread along these same forgotten routes? Many researchers believe so. Yet Barnenez continues to inspire questions extending beyond conventional archaeology. One recurring mystery concerns the monument's orientation. Several passage graves appear to align generally toward the southeast, where the rising sun illuminates the landscape during particular seasons. Researchers have explored whether sunlight may once have penetrated specific corridors at important times of the year, perhaps marking seasonal ceremonies connected to agriculture, renewal, or remembrance. The evidence remains suggestive rather than conclusive. Unlike later monuments with unmistakable astronomical alignments, Barnenez presents a more complicated picture. Slight variations between chambers make precise interpretations difficult, particularly after thousands of years of structural change. Nevertheless, the relationship between prehistoric monuments and celestial observation appears too common to ignore entirely. Across Europe, ancient builders repeatedly demonstrated an awareness of solar and lunar cycles. Was Barnenez another expression of this tradition? Or were any apparent alignments simply practical consequences of building upon favorable terrain? The stones offer no definitive answer. Then there are the engraved symbols. Among the most famous are axe-like motifs carved into chamber walls. Some researchers interpret them as representations of polished stone axes, valuable objects associated with status, authority, or ritual power. Others see entirely different meanings. Curving lines have been interpreted as serpents, flowing water, agricultural fields, or symbolic pathways connecting worlds. A few abstract carvings resemble waves, leading some scholars to wonder whether the nearby sea held particular spiritual significance. None of these interpretations can be confirmed. Without written explanations, symbolism remains one of archaeology's most difficult puzzles. Perhaps the carvings communicated ideas that every visitor immediately recognized 6,000 years ago, but which have become completely unintelligible to modern observers. Among more speculative theories, Barnenez occupies an especially prominent place. Some independent researchers argue that its remarkable age forces historians to reconsider the intellectual capabilities of Europe's earliest farming societies. They suggest that monumental architecture of this sophistication implies extensive knowledge systems passed down through countless generations before construction even began. Mainstream archaeology largely agrees with the first part of this observation. Building Barnenez certainly required advanced planning, engineering skill, and social organization. Where opinions diverge is whether such achievements require invoking forgotten civilizations or hidden technologies. Most evidence indicates that gradual cultural development provides an entirely sufficient explanation. Human communities are capable of astonishing accomplishments when knowledge accumulates steadily over centuries. Even so, certain questions remain open. How many earlier monuments, built from wood rather than stone, disappeared without leaving recognizable traces? How much experimentation preceded Barnenez before builders mastered techniques capable of producing such enduring structures? The monument we see today may represent not the beginning of monumental architecture, but the surviving chapter of a much longer story. Other speculative ideas focus on the possibility that Barnenez belonged to a vast ceremonial landscape extending far beyond the visible monument. Nearby standing stones, pathways, springs, and elevated viewpoints may once have formed interconnected sacred spaces, now erased by agriculture and changing coastlines. Only fragments survive. Perhaps entire ritual complexes still lie hidden beneath surrounding fields. Perhaps ancient processional routes vanished beneath modern roads centuries ago. Perhaps the monument originally appeared within a landscape filled with symbolic features impossible to reconstruct completely. One remarkable episode in Barnenez's modern history almost erased these mysteries forever. During the 1950s, part of the cairn was quarried for building stone. Workers removed sections of the mound before recognizing that hidden chambers lay inside. Archaeological investigations quickly followed, revealing the true significance of the monument and halting further destruction. It is difficult not to wonder how many ancient sites disappeared entirely before anyone realized what they contained. Barnenez survived almost by accident. Today, visitors walk quietly through restored passages where sunlight filters across stones placed by hands separated from us by more than 60 centuries. The air inside the chambers feels cool and still. Every footstep echoes softly against walls that have witnessed thousands of years of changing civilizations. Empires have risen, kingdoms have fallen, languages have appeared and vanished. Yet these ancient chambers remain almost exactly where their builders intended. Standing within them, it becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss the possibility that their greatest purpose was never simply to house the dead. Perhaps they were designed to preserve memory itself, to anchor communities within landscapes that changed only slowly across generations. Perhaps every carved symbol, every carefully aligned passage, and every massive stone formed part of a worldview too complex to recover through excavation alone. The people who built Barnenez succeeded in one remarkable way. They created something capable of outliving nearly every trace of their own civilization. But in doing so, they left modern archaeology facing an enduring paradox. The monument itself survives in extraordinary detail, while the beliefs, ceremonies, songs, and stories that gave it meaning have almost completely vanished. And somewhere within those silent chambers, beneath thousands of tons of ancient stone overlooking the restless Atlantic, one cannot help but wonder whether the greatest secret of Barnenez was never buried in the tombs at all, but hidden within the minds of the people who gathered there, a mystery that may remain forever beyond our reach. As the ancient stones of Barnenez fade into the distance, our journey continues toward another place where humanity took its earliest steps into organized life. This time, the mystery is not hidden beneath monumental tombs or carved into massive cairns, but scattered across the remains of an entire community. Here, on a gentle hill overlooking the fertile plains of central Greece, lies a settlement that challenges many assumptions about the beginnings of civilization. The hill of Sesklo rises quietly above the Thessalian landscape, surrounded by broad valleys that have nourished human life for thousands of years. In spring, the fields are covered in green, while distant mountains frame the horizon beneath wide Mediterranean skies. It is a peaceful place, far removed from the bustling cities of the modern world. Yet beneath the soil are the foundations of one of Europe's oldest known farming communities, a settlement whose origins reach back nearly 8,000 years. Today, little remains beyond low stone walls tracing the outlines of ancient homes. Broken pottery lies preserved in museums, while fragments of ovens, storage rooms, and courtyards hint at lives once lived in remarkable sophistication. At first glance, Sesklo appears modest compared to the towering monuments we have already explored. There are no colossal pyramids, no imposing fortifications, and no enormous burial mounds dominating the landscape. Its mystery lies elsewhere. It lies in the realization that long before cities rose in Mesopotamia, before pharaohs ruled the Nile, and before bronze reshaped human history, an organized community was already thriving here. Families built permanent houses from stone and mud brick. They cultivated crops, raised domesticated animals, crafted beautifully decorated pottery, and established patterns of daily life that would influence generations to come. Archaeologists believe the earliest occupation at Sesklo began around 6,800 BC during the Neolithic period, making it one of the oldest large farming settlements in Europe. Over centuries, the community expanded steadily across the hillside. Hundreds of people may have lived here at its height, constructing rectangular homes arranged around open spaces and narrow pathways. Unlike temporary camps occupied by earlier hunter-gatherers, Sesklo represented permanence. People were no longer simply passing through the landscape. They were shaping it. Excavations have uncovered remarkable evidence of daily life. Grinding stones used for processing grain remain where they were abandoned thousands of years ago. Clay ovens reveal sophisticated methods of food preparation. Storage vessels suggest careful planning for future harvests. Animal bones indicate the domestication of sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs, while botanical remains demonstrate the cultivation of wheat and barley. Perhaps most striking of all is the pottery. Sesklo ceramics are among the finest examples of early Neolithic craftsmanship in Europe. Bowls, jars, and cups were carefully formed by hand before being decorated with elegant red geometric patterns painted against lighter backgrounds. Spirals, triangles, zigzags, and flowing lines transformed everyday household objects into works of remarkable artistic expression. These were not merely practical containers. They reflected creativity, shared traditions, and cultural identity. The sophistication of this pottery has long fascinated archaeologists because it appears surprisingly early in European prehistory. Rather than representing crude experimentation, many vessels display confident craftsmanship developed through generations of accumulated knowledge. How quickly did these artistic traditions emerge? Were they invented locally or introduced through contact with earlier farming communities farther east? The answers remain incomplete. The mainstream explanation places Sesklo within the broader spread of agriculture from Anatolia into southeastern Europe. As farming gradually expanded westward, communities carried with them domesticated plants, animals, construction techniques, and aspects of material culture. Over time, local traditions evolved into distinctive regional identities, with Sesklo becoming one of the most successful examples. Genetic studies and archaeological discoveries largely support this gradual process of migration and cultural exchange. Yet the story is far from simple. Sesklo did not merely imitate earlier settlements. It developed its own architectural style, artistic traditions, and social organization that flourished for centuries. Some archaeologists believe the community may have functioned as an important regional center, influencing neighboring villages through trade, marriage, and the exchange of ideas. The settlement itself appears surprisingly well organized. Many houses were built upon stone foundations supporting mud brick walls. Some contained multiple rooms, designated storage spaces, hearths, and carefully prepared floors. Certain structures were larger than others, raising questions about differences in wealth, status, or family size. Did community leaders already exist? Were decisions made collectively, or did influential households guide the settlement's development? Without written records, certainty remains impossible. Perhaps everyone shared responsibilities equally, or perhaps the earliest forms of social hierarchy had already begun to emerge. Another fascinating mystery surrounds the apparent continuity of life at Sesklo. Generation after generation rebuilt homes upon the same hill. Older structures were repaired, expanded, or replaced while preserving the overall settlement. Rather than abandoning the site, its inhabitants repeatedly chose to remain. Why here? The surrounding plains certainly offered fertile farmland, reliable water sources, and favorable conditions for agriculture. Yet practical advantages alone may not explain such long-term attachment. Over centuries, familiar places acquire meaning. Children become parents. Parents become ancestors. The landscape itself becomes part of a community's identity. Like the great burial monuments we explored earlier, Sesklo may have represented far more than a collection of houses. It may have become home in the deepest possible sense. Then, sometime around 5000 BC, dramatic changes occurred. Evidence suggests that portions of the settlement were destroyed by fire. Burned clay, collapsed walls, and layers of ash appear throughout parts of the archaeological record. What caused the destruction remains uncertain. The simplest explanation points toward accidental fires. Neolithic homes relied heavily upon wood, thatch, and open hearths. A single uncontrolled blaze could spread rapidly through closely built houses. Others propose conflict. As populations expanded across the region, competition over farmland and resources may have increased. Could neighboring communities have attacked Sesklo? Direct evidence for organized warfare remains limited. No overwhelming archaeological proof confirms a violent assault. Natural disasters provide another possibility. Earthquakes are not uncommon in Greece. Structural damage followed by fire could account for some of the destruction observed during excavations. Yet no single explanation fully satisfies every detail. Curiously, the site was not permanently abandoned. Communities continued occupying the hill after periods of destruction, rebuilding once again despite whatever challenges they had faced. This resilience raises another question. What made Sesklo worth returning to? Among archaeologists, one long-standing discussion concerns the relationship between Sesklo and another important Neolithic site located nearby, Dimini. For many years, scholars proposed that the rise of Dimini coincided with the decline of Sesklo, perhaps representing newcomers who displaced the earlier inhabitants. According to this interpretation, changing populations reshaped the region through migration or competition. More recent research paints a more complex picture. Evidence increasingly suggests that both settlements may have coexisted for a period rather than replacing one another outright. If true, interaction rather than conquest may explain the transition. Trade, shared innovations, intermarriage, cultural evolution. The archaeological record often reveals gradual change where earlier generations imagined dramatic collapse. Still, important uncertainties remain. The relationship between these neighboring communities has yet to be fully understood. Beyond conventional archaeology, Sesklo has inspired broader speculation. Its unexpectedly early sophistication has prompted some writers to argue that the development of European civilization began much earlier than traditionally believed. They point to organized housing, advanced pottery, agriculture, and long-term settlement planning as evidence that Neolithic societies possessed remarkable intellectual and social capabilities. Mainstream archaeology largely agrees with this conclusion. Early farming communities were indeed highly innovative. What remains debated is the speed and complexity of that development rather than its existence. More speculative theories extend even further. A few researchers have proposed that settlements like Sesklo preserve fragments of an almost forgotten chapter of European prehistory, a world of interconnected farming societies sharing knowledge across vast distances before written history began. Certainly, similarities between Neolithic sites across southeastern Europe suggest communication and cultural exchange. Whether these networks were extensive enough to resemble early civilizations remains an open question. Others focus on symbolic aspects of the settlement. The repeated rebuilding of houses upon earlier foundations has occasionally been interpreted as reflecting spiritual beliefs connecting the living with previous generations. Homes themselves may have possessed sacred significance, becoming physical links between ancestors and descendants. Such ideas are difficult to verify archaeologically, yet they remind us that prehistoric architecture cannot always be understood purely through practical functions. Human beings build with emotion as well as necessity. Even the pottery continues to provoke quiet curiosity. The geometric designs decorating Sesklo vessels appear decorative, but were they merely artistic? Or did recurring patterns carry meanings now forgotten? Could spirals symbolize renewal? Did zigzags represent rivers, snakes, or spiritual journeys? Without written language, every interpretation remains tentative. The symbols endure, their explanations do not. Walking through the reconstructed remains today, it is striking how familiar the settlement feels. Narrow pathways separate neighboring homes. Shared spaces invite conversation. Hearths occupy the center of domestic life. Storage rooms preserve harvests for the coming seasons. The people of Sesklo laughed, argued, celebrated births, mourned losses, prepared meals, and watched children grow beneath the same changing skies we know today. They were separated from us by thousands of years, yet connected through experiences that remain profoundly human. Perhaps that is why Sesklo continues to fascinate archaeologists. Its greatest mystery is not hidden treasure or lost technology. It is the emergence of community itself. Somehow, in this quiet corner of Greece, small groups of farmers transformed survival into society. They built permanence from uncertainty. They established traditions that outlived generations. They created homes whose foundations still remain after nearly 8 millennia. Yet countless questions continue to linger beneath the soil. How much knowledge passed between settlements before history was ever written? What beliefs guided the people who shaped this remarkable community? And beneath the unexcavated layers of Sesklo, could there still be forgotten houses, untouched artifacts, or silent clues waiting to reveal how some of Europe's earliest villagers learned not only to live together, but to build a civilization whose origins remain only partially understood? From the stone circles of Mizora, where ancient people shaped the landscape into monuments of memory and mystery, our journey now moves across the Atlantic world to the forests of northern Brazil. Far from the open plains and megalithic landscapes of North Africa, another ancient story is written not in towering stones, but in hidden rock shelters, painted walls, and traces of human presence preserved deep within the earth. In the remote region of Monte Alegre, near the Amazon River, a collection of ancient shelters holds one of the most fascinating archaeological mysteries of the Americas. These are the Monte Alegre rock shelters. Located in the state of Pará, Brazil, within a landscape of forests, rivers, and dramatic sandstone formations, these shelters reveal evidence of human activity stretching back thousands of years. Carved naturally into the cliffs, the caves and overhangs provided protection from the elements and created spaces where ancient communities could live, gather, and leave behind traces of their existence. At first, the shelters appear quiet. The surrounding forest dominates the landscape. Trees grow around the cliffs, birds move through the canopy, and rivers continue their ancient paths. But beneath the natural beauty lies something extraordinary. Evidence that humans were present in this region far earlier than many traditional theories once suggested. The most famous discoveries at Monte Alegre are the ancient rock paintings. Across the walls, prehistoric artists left behind images created with pigments made from natural minerals. Deep red, yellow, black, and white tones form patterns and symbols that have survived through centuries of exposure. Some paintings depict animals, others show geometric shapes, lines, and abstract designs, yet many remain difficult to interpret. What did these images mean to the people who created them? Were they records of daily life? Symbols connected to spiritual beliefs? Messages passed between generations? or something entirely different that modern observers can no longer recognize? The mystery begins with a simple fact. The people who painted these walls are gone, and the world they inhabited has changed dramatically. Archaeologists have studied the Monte Alegre region for decades, uncovering evidence of ancient occupation, including stone tools, remains of human activity, and traces of early settlement. Some research suggests that people were living in the area many thousands of years ago, possibly around 11,000 years ago or earlier. This timeline is significant. For much of the 20th century, many models of human settlement in the Americas focused on the idea that large-scale human migration occurred relatively late, with groups spreading through the continents after the appearance of certain well-known archaeological cultures. But sites like Monte Alegre contributed to a more complicated picture. They suggested that human presence in the Americas may have deeper and more diverse roots than previously assumed. How did the first people reach these regions? How did they adapt to the vast and challenging Amazonian environment? And how much of their story has been lost beneath the forests? The Amazon is often imagined as untouched wilderness, but archaeology has increasingly shown that ancient communities shaped and interacted with these landscapes in complex ways. They were not simply surviving in the forest, they were observing it, understanding it, and becoming part of it. Monte Alegre provides a glimpse into this relationship. The rock shelters were not chosen randomly. Their location offered protection, visibility, and access to surrounding resources. Nearby rivers provided water and transportation routes. The forest offered plants and animals that could support human life. But the paintings suggest that these places may have been more than practical shelters. The act of painting itself required time, preparation, and intention. Pigments had to be collected and processed. Surfaces had to be prepared. Artists had to return to these locations repeatedly. Why? Perhaps the shelters served as places of ceremony. Perhaps they were spaces where communities preserved knowledge. Perhaps the images represented stories, myths, or beliefs about the world around them. The challenge is that symbols do not easily survive across thousands of years. Perhaps the images represented stories, myths, or beliefs about the world around them. From the quiet streets of one of Europe's earliest farming villages, our journey now leads north into a landscape where ancient memory seems woven into the very earth itself. Here, the mystery is no longer found in the remains of daily life, but in monuments built for the dead, structures so carefully planned that they appear to bridge the worlds of astronomy, ritual, and remembrance. In the Scottish Highlands, surrounded by forests, rolling fields, and the slow-moving waters of the River Nairn, lies one of Britain's most captivating prehistoric sites, the Balnuaran of Clava. The first impression is one of remarkable stillness. 3 circular stone cairns rest within a peaceful clearing, enclosed by rings of standing stones weathered by more than 4,000 years of rain, frost, and wind. Moss clings to ancient rock. Heather grows between carefully laid stones. During the early morning, mist often drifts silently across the ground, softening every outline until the monuments seem to emerge gradually from another age. Nothing here is monumental in height. There are no towering temples or colossal statues demanding attention. Instead, the Clava cairns possess something quieter, a precise harmony that rewards careful observation rather than immediate spectacle. Every stone appears intentionally placed. Every entrance faces a particular direction. Every circle suggests planning that extended far beyond simple construction. It is this quiet precision that has fascinated archaeologists for generations. The Balnuaran of Clava dates to roughly 2000 BC during the Bronze Age. Although often referred to collectively as the Clava Cairns, the site consists of several distinct monuments representing 2 closely related architectural styles. 2 are passage graves, where narrow corridors lead into enclosed burial chambers. The third is a ring cairn, containing an open central space rather than a fully enclosed chamber. Despite these differences, all three monuments display an extraordinary level of design. Each cairn is surrounded by a circle of standing stones whose heights appear carefully graded. Taller stones generally occupy the southwest side, while shorter stones stand toward the northeast, creating an intentional visual rhythm around each monument. Was this purely aesthetic, or did these varying heights carry symbolic meaning? The builders left no explanation. Archaeological excavations indicate that these monuments served primarily as burial sites. Cremated human remains have been discovered within several chambers, together with fragments of pottery and other grave deposits. Unlike the great communal tombs of earlier Neolithic Europe, however, Clava burials appear comparatively limited in number. This has prompted an intriguing question. Were these monuments reserved for particular individuals rather than entire communities? Perhaps important leaders, perhaps respected elders, perhaps people whose identities carried special significance within Bronze Age society. The archaeological evidence cannot yet provide certainty. Yet even more intriguing than the burials themselves is the remarkable consistency of the site's orientation. Every passage grave at Balnuaran of Clava faces approximately toward the southwest, where the sun sets during the winter solstice. This alignment has been confirmed repeatedly through archaeological study. On the shortest day of the year, the setting sun shines directly into the entrance passages, illuminating the interior chambers with its final golden light before disappearing below the horizon. Such precision is unlikely to be accidental. For ancient communities whose lives depended upon seasonal cycles, the winter solstice represented far more than an astronomical event. It marked the turning point of the year, when darkness finally began to surrender to returning light. Across prehistoric Europe, evidence suggests that this moment held profound symbolic importance. At Clava, the dead appear to have been placed in direct relationship with that celestial event. Why? One interpretation suggests that the setting sun symbolized the journey into death. Just as daylight disappeared beneath the horizon, only to return again the following morning, perhaps human life was understood as part of a similar cycle of departure and renewal. The burial chambers may therefore have represented places where the living acknowledged both endings and beginnings. Some independent researchers argue that the astronomical alignments found at Clava demonstrate a level of observational precision that has often been underestimated. They point out that identifying the exact point of the winter solstice sunset requires patient observation extending over many years. Such knowledge would have demanded careful record-keeping, even if those records existed only through oral tradition. Mainstream archaeology generally agrees that prehistoric communities were entirely capable of acquiring such knowledge through generations of careful sky-watching. No advanced technology would have been necessary. Only patience, memory, and an enduring commitment to observing nature. Still, this raises another question. If Bronze Age communities devoted so much attention to celestial events, how deeply were astronomy and religion intertwined? Were these monuments observatories, temples, cemeteries, or were such distinctions meaningless to the people who built them? Perhaps every ceremony naturally incorporated the movements of the heavens. Among the more imaginative interpretations are suggestions that Clava formed part of an ancient ceremonial network extending across Britain and Ireland, where monuments aligned not only with astronomical events, but also with one another through symbolic geography. Some writers propose invisible pathways connecting sacred landscapes according to patterns modern researchers have only begun to recognize. To date, no convincing archaeological evidence confirms such extensive systems. Nevertheless, the recurrence of carefully positioned monuments throughout prehistoric Europe continues to inspire discussion. Perhaps ancient builders understood landscapes differently than we do today. Rather than viewing isolated monuments, they may have perceived entire regions as interconnected ceremonial environments. One particularly intriguing aspect of Balnuaran of Clava is its enduring influence upon later generations. The monuments remained visible for thousands of years after their original purpose had faded from memory. During the Iron Age, later communities built structures nearby. Centuries afterward, local traditions surrounded the site with folklore involving spirits, fairies, and supernatural beings. Such legends emerged long after the cairns were constructed. Yet their persistence reveals something important. Even when historical knowledge disappears, remarkable places continue attracting stories. Human imagination rarely tolerates unexplained monuments for long. Perhaps every generation invents new explanations to fill the silence left behind by forgotten builders. The landscape itself encourages reflection. As evening approaches, sunlight gradually shifts across the standing stones before settling upon the southwestern horizon, exactly where Bronze Age observers once watched the winter sun disappear. Shadows lengthen between the circles. The burial chambers grow darker with every passing minute. Nothing moves except the wind. And yet the site never feels abandoned. Instead, it possesses the quiet atmosphere of a place still waiting. Waiting for another sunset. Waiting for another solstice. Waiting perhaps for questions that remain as compelling today as they were thousands of years ago. Who were the people honored within these carefully aligned chambers? Why was the returning light of midwinter so deeply connected to their understanding of death? What meanings were hidden within the colored stones, the graded circles, and the precisely chosen orientations? And if the builders intended these monuments to communicate something across the centuries, have we recognized only the visible architecture while overlooking the far more profound message concealed within the landscape itself? The stones remain exactly where they have stood for 4 millennia. They continue to greet the winter sun with unwavering precision, just as their builders intended. But the beliefs that gave those alignments meaning have vanished almost completely, leaving behind only silence and the enduring possibility that Balnuaran of Clava still guards secrets that archaeology has yet to uncover. From the mist-covered stone circles of the Scottish Highlands, our journey now crosses an ocean and enters a very different landscape. The cool forests of northern Europe give way to the rugged highlands of central Mexico, where dry winds sweep across volcanic hills and ancient walls rise from the rocky slopes. Here, surrounded by cactus-covered ridges and wide valleys, stands the mysterious city of La Quemada, a place that has challenged archaeologists for more than a century. Even today, no one can say with complete certainty who built it, why it grew so powerful, or why it was ultimately abandoned. Perched high above the Malpaso Valley in the modern state of Zacatecas, La Quemada dominates the surrounding landscape. Massive stone terraces climb the hillside like giant stairways carved into the mountain itself. Thick defensive walls snake across the slopes, while broad plazas, pyramidal platforms, long causeways, and towering columns emerge from the rugged terrain. From above, the city appears almost like a fortress suspended between earth and sky. Standing among its weathered ruins, it is impossible not to feel a sense of deliberate purpose. Every terrace seems carefully engineered. Every staircase directs movement toward higher ground. Every wall suggests a civilization determined to shape the landscape rather than simply occupy it. Unlike many famous archaeological sites of ancient Mexico, La Quemada has never yielded a clear historical identity. No surviving written records describe its founders. No inscriptions reveal the names of its rulers. Even the name La Quemada, meaning the burned one, was given centuries later by Spanish settlers, who encountered evidence that parts of the site had been consumed by fire long before European arrival. Its original name has been lost. Its people remain anonymous. Archaeologists generally date the city's greatest period of occupation between approximately AD 600 and 900, during the Epiclassic period of Mesoamerican history. At its height, La Quemada covered hundreds of acres and supported a substantial population. Monumental architecture dominated the hilltop, while surrounding settlements spread into nearby valleys. The builders constructed extensive retaining walls to create level terraces on the steep slopes. These engineering achievements required enormous quantities of locally quarried volcanic stone and the coordinated labor of countless workers. The city was anything but isolated. Excavations have uncovered pottery, obsidian tools, shell ornaments, copper objects, and imported materials, indicating participation in long-distance trade networks extending across much of ancient Mexico. Clearly, La Quemada occupied an important position within a wider world. Yet its exact role remains one of archaeology's enduring puzzles. One long-standing theory proposed that La Quemada served as an outpost of the great city of Teotihuacan, whose influence once extended across large portions of Mesoamerica. Similarities in certain architectural features encouraged early researchers to view the site as a northern colony established to secure trade routes and valuable resources. Modern archaeology has become more cautious. Although cultural contact with Teotihuacan almost certainly occurred, growing evidence suggests that La Quemada developed largely as an independent regional center rather than a distant colonial settlement. Its architecture reflects both outside influences and distinctly local traditions. Rather than belonging to one civilization, La Quemada appears to represent a unique society that adapted ideas from multiple neighboring cultures. Who these people called themselves remains unknown. Perhaps even more striking than the city's architecture are its defensive features. Unlike many ceremonial centers built primarily upon open plains, La Quemada appears designed with protection in mind. Defensive walls stretch across vulnerable approaches. Elevated terraces provide commanding views over the surrounding countryside. Narrow access points could easily have been controlled during times of conflict. Why such extensive fortifications? The mainstream explanation points toward increasing instability during the centuries before the city's decline. Competition over trade routes, agricultural resources, and political influence may have intensified throughout northern Mesoamerica. In such an environment, strong defenses would have been both practical and necessary. Evidence from surrounding regions supports the idea that warfare became increasingly common during this period. Yet the scale of La Quemada's fortifications has prompted further questions. Were they built in response to constant threats, or did they symbolize authority as much as protection? Monumental walls often communicate power long before they are ever tested in battle. Another remarkable feature dominates the site. Near the center of the city stands the Hall of Columns, one of La Quemada's most recognizable structures. Rows of massive stone columns once supported an enormous roof, creating an impressive gathering space unlike almost anything else found in the region. What occurred inside this great hall? Some archaeologists interpret it as an administrative center where leaders governed the community and managed regional affairs. Others believe it served ceremonial purposes, hosting rituals, feasts, or important political gatherings. Perhaps it fulfilled both functions simultaneously. In many ancient societies, religion and government were deeply intertwined. Nearby lies another intriguing structure known as the votive pyramid. Rising above surrounding terraces, it commands sweeping views across the valley below. From its summit, observers could watch travelers approaching from great distances, while also surveying the city's monumental core. Its elevated position naturally raises another possibility. Did astronomy influence its placement? Researchers have noted that certain structures throughout La Quemada appear aligned with significant solar events or prominent landscape features. While evidence for deliberate astronomical planning remains limited compared to sites specifically designed around celestial observation, the possibility continues to attract scholarly interest. Throughout ancient Mesoamerica, architecture often reflected both earthly and cosmic order. Could La Camada have followed similar principles? The answer remains uncertain. Perhaps the city's greatest mystery concerns its dramatic end. Archaeological evidence indicates that large portions of La Camada were destroyed by intense fire sometime around the 9th century. Burned beams, collapsed buildings, and widespread signs of destruction suggest that flames swept through important sections of the settlement. But what caused the catastrophe? One explanation points toward warfare. An invading force may have captured the city, setting buildings ablaze during or after conquest. Another possibility suggests internal conflict. Political unrest, rebellion, or struggles between rival factions could have ended in deliberate destruction. Environmental stress offers another perspective. Periods of prolonged drought affected many regions of Mesoamerica during this era. Declining harvests may have weakened political authority, disrupted trade networks, and encouraged migration away from vulnerable settlements. Fire, in this scenario, may have accompanied gradual abandonment rather than sudden military defeat. No single explanation satisfies every piece of evidence. Perhaps several factors combined. A society already weakened by environmental pressures could have become increasingly vulnerable to conflict. History rarely follows a single cause. The archaeological discoveries themselves add further complexity. Excavations have uncovered numerous human remains, some displaying evidence of trauma or unusual treatment after death. Certain skeletal assemblages suggest ritual practices that continue to provoke discussion among researchers. Were these victims of warfare? Participants in ceremonial rites? Individuals honored according to customs no longer understood? Interpreting ancient burial practices is rarely straightforward. Modern assumptions often fail to capture prehistoric beliefs about death and remembrance. Among more speculative interpretations, La Camada has inspired no shortage of theories. For generations, some historians associated the site with the legendary Chikamaztoc, the mythical place of the 7 caves, described in later Mesoamerican traditions as the ancestral homeland of several peoples. The dramatic landscape certainly lends itself to such speculation. Rocky hills, caves, monumental architecture, and commanding views create an atmosphere that feels almost legendary. Yet, archaeological evidence has never confirmed the identification. Most specialists regard the connection as an intriguing possibility, rooted more in later tradition than in direct historical proof. Other researchers have suggested that La Camada occupied a crucial position along vast trade corridors linking central Mexico with communities farther north. Rather than serving merely as a city, it may have functioned as a fortified commercial hub where merchants exchanged goods, ideas, technologies, and religious traditions. Its strategic location certainly supports such a role. Trade often creates wealth. Wealth attracts both opportunity and conflict. A few independent writers have proposed even broader interpretations, arguing that La Camada belonged to a forgotten network of sophisticated urban centers whose relationships remain only partially understood because so many sites have yet to be excavated. They point to similarities in architecture, ceremonial spaces, and defensive planning across distant regions. Mainstream archaeology acknowledges extensive interaction between ancient societies while cautioning against assuming centralized political control without stronger evidence. Connections undoubtedly existed. Their exact nature remains an active area of research. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of La Camada is the tension between what is visible and what remains hidden. Only portions of the ancient city have been fully excavated. Much of the surrounding landscape still conceals buried architecture beneath layers of soil and vegetation. Every archaeological season uncovers new information, but also raises additional questions. How large was the original settlement? How many people actually lived here? What stories remain preserved beneath the untouched terraces? As the sun begins to sink behind the western hills, long shadows stretch across the stone platforms. The walls glow with warm shades of gold before gradually fading into darkness. Wind whistles softly through the ruined columns where voices once echoed centuries ago. The city seems strangely alive in these final moments of daylight, not because its mysteries have been solved, but because they remain unresolved. Whoever built La Quemada possessed remarkable engineering skill, extensive trade connections, and the organizational ability to transform a rugged hillside into one of northern Mesoamerica's most impressive urban centers. Yet they left behind almost none of the written history that might explain their identity, their beliefs, or the events that ended their civilization. Perhaps future excavations will uncover forgotten inscriptions or hidden structures capable of reshaping our understanding of this remarkable place. Or perhaps La Quemada will continue to guard its greatest secrets beneath its silent terraces, reminding us that even the grandest cities can outlive the memories of the people who once called them home, and that some chapters of human history remain written only in stone, waiting patiently for someone who can finally learn how to read them. As the stone terraces of La Quemada disappear beyond the horizon, our journey returns once more to the Atlantic coast of Western Europe, where another monument has endured for thousands of years in quiet isolation. If La Quemada challenged us with the mystery of a forgotten city, the sight ahead presents a different kind of puzzle, one carved not into towering walls or defensive fortifications, but into stone itself. Here, every surface seems to speak in symbols, yet no one alive can fully understand the language they preserve. Just off the coast of Brittany in northwestern France lies the small island of Gavrinis. Surrounded by the calm waters of the Gulf of Morbihan, the island appears peaceful and almost untouched by time. Dense vegetation covers much of its landscape, while gentle waves lap against rocky shores shaped by thousands of years of tides. Hidden within this tranquil setting stands one of the most extraordinary prehistoric monuments in Europe, the Gavrinis burial cairn. From the outside, the cairn resembles nothing more than a rounded hill covered with grass and low vegetation. Measuring roughly 50 meters in diameter, it rises quietly above the surrounding landscape without the dramatic appearance of a castle or temple. Visitors approaching for the first time often have little reason to suspect that beneath this modest mound lies one of the most remarkable works of prehistoric art ever discovered. A narrow stone passage disappears into darkness. Step inside, and the atmosphere changes immediately. The sounds of the outside world fade behind thick layers of stone. Cool air fills the corridor, while carefully fitted slabs line both sides of the passage. Sunlight reaches only a short distance before surrendering to shadow. Yet it is not the architecture alone that captures attention. It is the carvings. Nearly every upright stone along the 14-meter passage is covered with intricate engravings. Spirals, arcs, zigzags, concentric curves, axe-like shapes, serpentine lines, and abstract geometric figures cover the surfaces with astonishing precision. More than 20 decorated stones transform the corridor into something that feels less like a burial passage and more like a gallery carved by hands separated from us by over 6,000 years. Few prehistoric monuments anywhere in Europe preserve such an extraordinary concentration of megalithic art. The cairn itself was constructed around 3,500 BC during the Neolithic period, making it older than Stonehenge and centuries older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Archaeological evidence suggests that builders carefully assembled thousands of tons of stone to create the mound, constructing a long passage leading toward a single burial chamber near its center. Like many megalithic tombs across Brittany, Gavrinis clearly served as a funerary monument. Fragments of human remains, stone tools, and ceremonial objects have been recovered during excavations. Yet the burials themselves tell only part of the story. The carvings tell another, or rather, they attempt to. The problem is that no one truly knows what they mean. Archaeologists have spent generations studying these engravings. Certain motifs appear repeatedly throughout Brittany and neighboring regions. Stylized axes are among the most recognizable symbols. Some researchers interpret them as representations of prestige objects associated with leadership or ritual authority. Curved lines have been described as serpents. Others resemble flowing water. Still others have been interpreted as waves, plant forms, bows, shields, or celestial symbols. Each interpretation remains tentative. Without written language, symbolism becomes remarkably difficult to decode. Were these images decorative? Did they identify individuals buried within the chamber? Were they maps, religious symbols, clan emblems, or visual stories passed from one generation to another? Perhaps they communicated ideas impossible to express through spoken language alone. Or perhaps their meanings depended upon ceremonies that disappeared thousands of years ago. One particularly fascinating discovery has deepened the mystery even further. Several decorated stones inside Gavrinis were once part of entirely different monuments. Careful analysis revealed that some engraved slabs had originally belonged to much larger standing stones before being broken apart and incorporated into the cairn during construction. Even more remarkable, fragments matching these stones have been identified at nearby prehistoric sites, including the famous Table des Marchands and Air Gras monuments. At some point in the distant past, an enormous standing stone appears to have been deliberately broken into pieces. Those fragments were then transported and reused in multiple monuments across the region. Why? The practical explanation suggests simple recycling. Large stones required tremendous effort to quarry and transport. Reusing earlier monuments may have been an efficient solution. Yet many archaeologists believe the decision carried deeper symbolic meaning. Breaking a sacred monument and incorporating its pieces into new ceremonial structures may have represented continuity rather than destruction. Perhaps the builders were preserving the spiritual power of an older monument by giving it new life. If so, the stones themselves possessed significance extending beyond their physical function. Memory became architecture. Another question concerns the astonishing craftsmanship of the engravings. Many carvings display confident execution despite being cut into extremely hard granite using only stone tools. The consistency of the designs suggests experienced artisans rather than occasional decoration. Who were these carvers? Did specialist artists exist within Neolithic society? Were certain individuals entrusted with preserving sacred imagery passed down across generations? Or did each community contribute its own symbolic language to the monument? No surviving evidence answers these questions directly. The corridor itself has also attracted considerable attention. Like several other passage graves in Brittany, the entrance appears broadly oriented toward the southeast. Researchers have proposed that sunlight during particular times of the year may have penetrated deeper into the passage than at other seasons. Unlike monuments with clearly demonstrated solstice alignments, however, Gavrinis presents a more complicated picture. Some scholars argue that any astronomical significance remains uncertain. Others believe the orientation was intentional but reflected symbolic rather than purely observational purposes. Throughout Neolithic Europe, astronomy and spirituality often appear closely connected. Watching the sky was not merely scientific. It shaped agriculture, ceremony, time itself. Could the journey through Gavrinis have mirrored the daily or seasonal journey of the sun? The possibility remains open. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounds the sheer sophistication of the monument. Constructing Gavrinis required remarkable planning. Thousands of stones had to be gathered, transported, and carefully positioned. Massive capstones spanning the burial chamber weigh many tons, yet remain securely balanced after more than 6 millennia. Modern experiments demonstrate that such achievements were entirely possible using prehistoric technology. Wooden rollers, ropes, earthen ramps, hundreds of coordinated workers. Human ingenuity alone provides a convincing explanation. Yet understanding how something was built is different from understanding why. Why devote so much labor to a monument that housed comparatively few burials? The answer may lie in its broader social role. Many archaeologists believe monuments like Gavrinis functioned not simply as tombs, but as ceremonial centers where communities gathered to reinforce shared identity and collective memory. Construction itself may have become an act of cooperation, strengthening relationships among neighboring settlements. The monument represented the living as much as the dead. Still, certain aspects continue to encourage more speculative interpretations. Because the carvings display recurring geometric patterns, some independent researchers have proposed that they encode astronomical observations or mathematical concepts now forgotten. Others suggest they functioned as symbolic maps representing rivers, coastlines, or sacred landscapes known only to Neolithic communities. No convincing evidence has confirmed these ideas. Nevertheless, the remarkable consistency of certain motifs across multiple megalithic sites suggests that they belonged to a shared symbolic tradition extending far beyond a single monument. Perhaps prehistoric Europe possessed a visual language understood across vast regions long before writing emerged. If so, only fragments survive. Other speculative theories focus upon the island itself. Today, Gavrinis is separated from the mainland by water, requiring a short boat journey to reach the monument. During the Neolithic period, however, sea levels differed somewhat from today, and the surrounding landscape would have looked different. Was the island already isolated? Or did later changes transform what was once an easily accessible ceremonial center into a secluded monument surrounded by water? Researchers continue investigating ancient coastlines to better understand the environment experienced by the builders. Even subtle differences could reshape interpretations of the monument's original purpose. There is also something deeply intriguing about the emotional experience of entering the passage. Unlike open ceremonial sites exposed to sunlight and wide horizons, Gavrinis gradually encloses the visitor. The ceiling lowers, light diminishes. The carved stones surround every step. Movement slows almost instinctively. Whether intentional or not, the architecture creates a powerful transition between the outside world and the hidden chamber beyond. Perhaps this journey itself formed part of ancient ceremonies, not merely reaching the burial chamber, but experiencing the passage, moving physically, and perhaps spiritually, from one realm into another. The builders may have understood architecture not only as shelter, but as storytelling through space. Today, archaeologists continue documenting every carving using advanced digital scanning techniques capable of revealing details invisible to the naked eye. New technologies occasionally identify faint engravings overlooked for generations, reminding us that even well-known monuments can still yield fresh discoveries. Each newly recognized symbol raises another question, not another answer. As afternoon light fades across the Gulf of Morbihan, the grassy mound once again blends quietly into the landscape. Visitors depart by boat, leaving the island to the wind, the sea, and the enduring silence of its ancient stones. Deep inside the passage, the carvings remain exactly where Neolithic hands placed them more than 6,000 years ago, preserving messages that have survived long after the language behind them disappeared. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Gavrinis is not its age, its engineering, or even its extraordinary artwork. It is communication itself. Someone created these symbols believing they would be understood. Someone carved each line with purpose. Someone walked these corridors knowing precisely what every image meant. Yet across 60 centuries, that understanding has vanished almost completely. The monument still speaks. The stones still remember. Only we have forgotten how to listen. And somewhere within those beautifully carved walls, hidden beneath layers of interpretation and time, there may still be meanings waiting to emerge. If only we can learn to read a language that has remained silent for more than 6,000 years. As the carved stones of Gavrinis disappear into the Atlantic mist, our journey turns eastward once again, toward a mountain stronghold where mystery is etched not into symbols alone, but into the remains of an entire kingdom. Hidden deep within the forests of the Carpathian Mountains, surrounded by steep ridges and dense woodland, lies the ruined capital of a civilization that once challenged the greatest empire of its age. Even now, centuries after its fall, Sarmizegetusa Regia continues to guard secrets that history has never fully explained. The first glimpse of the site is unforgettable. Ancient stone walls emerge from towering beech and oak forests, their weathered blocks blending almost seamlessly into the mountainside. Moss carpets the fallen stones, while shafts of sunlight filter through the trees, illuminating fragments of terraces, stairways, and mysterious circular sanctuaries. Birds provide the only sound, interrupted occasionally by the rustling of leaves carried by cool mountain winds. It is a place that feels intentionally hidden. Unlike the monumental cities built across open plains, Sarmizegetusa Regia was protected by nature itself. Narrow mountain valleys controlled access, while steep slopes offered natural defenses on nearly every side. Even today, reaching the ruins requires a journey through landscapes that seem remarkably untouched by modern development. It is easy to understand why the ancient Dacians chose this location. Here, they could watch every approach. Here, they could defend their kingdom. And perhaps, here, they believed they stood closer to the heavens. Sarmizegetusa Regia flourished between the 1st century BC and the early 2nd century AD as the political, military, and religious center of the Dacian kingdom. Long before Roman legions marched into these mountains, the city had become the heart of a sophisticated civilization known for its skilled metalworkers, formidable warriors, and remarkable engineering. Today, much of what remains appears deceptively simple. Stone foundations trace the outlines of buildings long vanished. Terraces carved into the mountainside reveal careful urban planning. Fragments of defensive walls still cling to the slopes. Yet beneath this apparent simplicity lies evidence of extraordinary organization. The Dacians transformed an uneven mountain into a carefully designed capital. Massive retaining walls stabilized the terrain. Roads connected different sectors of the settlement. Water channels supplied fresh spring water across difficult elevations. The entire complex demonstrates a level of planning once underestimated by historians. Perhaps the site's most recognizable feature is its sacred area. Here, several circular and rectangular stone sanctuaries stand among the trees, arranged with remarkable precision. Large andesite blocks form concentric rings surrounding central spaces where ceremonies once unfolded. Wooden columns, now lost to time, once rose from carefully prepared stone bases, creating structures unlike almost anything else surviving from ancient Europe. Walking among these circles raises immediate questions. Why were they built in these particular shapes? What rituals took place here? Who gathered within these carefully arranged sanctuaries? Archaeologists generally agree that this area served important religious functions, yet many details remain uncertain. Unlike Greek temples or Roman shrines, the Dacians left no surviving written descriptions of their ceremonies. Their beliefs survive only through fragments recorded by outsiders, primarily Roman historians, whose understanding was often incomplete. One feature has attracted particular attention for generations. The so-called andesite sun, a circular arrangement of carefully positioned stone blocks, has become one of Sarmizegetusa Regia's most iconic monuments. Its symmetrical design immediately invites comparison with astronomical observatories found elsewhere in the ancient world. Some researchers have suggested that it functioned as a calendar, allowing priests to observe seasonal changes and determine important ceremonial dates. Others believe it served primarily symbolic purposes, representing cosmic order rather than practical astronomy. The debate continues. Certain alignments within the sanctuary complex appear deliberate. Some correspond generally with solar events. Others may reflect broader geometric planning. Yet no universal agreement has emerged regarding their exact purpose. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. While acknowledging possible astronomical significance, most researchers emphasize that ceremonial architecture often combines symbolic meaning with practical observation. The two need not be separated. For the Dacians, the movements of the heavens may have formed an essential part of religious life itself. Engineering achievements elsewhere across the city are equally impressive. Perhaps the most remarkable example is the sophisticated water distribution system. Clay pipes transported fresh spring water across difficult terrain into different sections of the settlement. Such infrastructure required careful surveying, precise gradients, and long-term maintenance. The Dacians clearly possessed considerable technical knowledge. Far from being isolated mountain tribes, they demonstrated engineering abilities comparable to many neighboring civilizations. Excavations have also uncovered workshops where iron tools, weapons, jewelry, and other crafted objects were produced. Rich deposits of gold and silver in the surrounding mountains contributed greatly to the kingdom's prosperity, attracting both trade and unwanted attention. Among those watching with increasing interest was Rome. The growing wealth and independence of the Dacian kingdom eventually brought it into direct conflict with Emperor Trajan. Two major wars, fought in AD 101 to 102 and AD 105 to 106, ended with the Roman conquest of Dacia. Historical sources describe the final campaign in dramatic terms. Roman armies advanced through difficult mountain terrain, capturing one fortress after another before finally reaching Sarmizegetusa Regia itself. According to Roman accounts, the city's water supply was deliberately cut, weakening its defenders before the final assault. Archaeological evidence supports the idea that major destruction occurred during this period. Buildings burned, walls collapsed, the capital was abandoned. Yet even this well-documented chapter leaves important mysteries unresolved. Perhaps the most famous concerns the legendary Dacian treasure. Ancient writers reported enormous quantities of gold hidden before the Roman conquest. Some accounts describe rivers temporarily diverted to conceal precious metals beneath their beds. Over the centuries, numerous treasures have indeed been discovered throughout the region. Gold bracelets, coins, jewelry, ceremonial objects. Yet many believe far more remains undiscovered. Has the legendary royal treasury truly been found? Or does part of it still lie concealed somewhere within the surrounding mountains? Despite decades of archaeological work, no definitive answer exists. Another enduring puzzle concerns the sanctuaries themselves. Why did Dacian religious architecture differ so dramatically from neighboring traditions? Circular layouts appear repeatedly throughout the sacred complex. Wooden structures once combined with precisely shaped stone elements to create buildings unlike Greek temples or Roman basilicas. Were these designs influenced by earlier European traditions? Did they reflect unique Dacian cosmology? Or do they preserve architectural ideas now almost entirely forgotten? The absence of written Dacian texts leaves researchers dependent upon archaeology alone. Each excavation reveals physical evidence. The meanings behind that evidence remain more elusive. Some scholars have suggested that the entire sacred district functioned as a ceremonial calendar, with priests observing celestial events to regulate agricultural festivals and religious observances. Others caution that visible alignments can easily appear more significant than originally intended. Human beings naturally seek patterns. Ancient builders also valued symmetry for aesthetic reasons. Distinguishing symbolism from coincidence is rarely straightforward. Still, the repeated emphasis on geometry throughout the sanctuary encourages continued investigation. As often happens with enigmatic archaeological sites, more speculative theories have flourished alongside mainstream research. One recurring claim suggests that Sarmizegetusa Regia served as an advanced astronomical observatory whose builders possessed knowledge far beyond conventional historical understanding. Supporters point to circular arrangements, proportional relationships, and possible solar alignments. Most archaeologists acknowledge that ancient societies carefully observed the heavens without accepting claims of forgotten scientific civilizations. Careful observation requires patience rather than advanced technology. The sky itself has always been humanity's oldest classroom. Other speculative traditions focus upon the surrounding mountains. Local folklore speaks of hidden tunnels extending beneath the capital, connecting distant fortresses through secret underground passages. To date, no archaeological evidence confirms such extensive tunnel systems. Yet isolated underground features do exist, encouraging continued speculation. Might smaller passages still remain undiscovered beneath collapsed structures? Could future excavations reveal engineering works concealed beneath centuries of forest growth? The possibility remains intriguing. Legends of hidden chambers have also persisted for generations. Treasure hunters, historians, and local storytellers have all contributed to tales of undiscovered vaults buried somewhere beneath the sacred terraces. Most such stories remain unsupported. Even so, archaeology repeatedly reminds us that remarkable discoveries often emerge where no one expected them. Entire temples, royal tombs, forgotten inscriptions. History continues surprising those willing to keep searching. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Sarmizegetusa Regia concerns the civilization itself. The Dacians occupied an important position within ancient Europe, interacting with Celts, Greeks, Scythians, and Romans while maintaining their own distinctive identity. Yet, because their written traditions remain almost entirely absent, much of their worldview has disappeared. We know how they built. We know whom they fought. We know something of what they traded. But what did they truly believe? What stories did parents tell their children? What songs echoed through these mountain sanctuaries during religious festivals? What meanings did the circular temples hold for those who gathered beneath their wooden columns? Stone preserves architecture, not memory. Today, visitors walk quietly among the surviving foundations while forests gradually reclaim the ancient terraces. The same mountains that once shielded the Dacian capital continue standing watch over its ruins. Deer move silently through the trees. Mist settles across the sanctuary at dawn, much as it did 2,000 years ago. The city seems suspended between history and legend. Its destruction is well documented. Its deeper identity remains only partially understood. Every fallen wall hints at forgotten ceremonies. Every stone circle invites another interpretation. Every unexplored corner of the surrounding mountains raises the possibility that more discoveries still await beneath the forest floor. Perhaps future archaeology will reveal hidden structures, overlooked inscriptions, or new evidence capable of transforming our understanding of this remarkable kingdom. Or perhaps Sarmizegetusa Regia will continue to remind us that even when empires record victories and historians preserve battles, the most important parts of a civilization, its beliefs, its hopes, and its understanding of the universe, can vanish almost completely, leaving only silent stones and enduring questions for those who come searching thousands of years later. As the forested sanctuaries of Sarmizegetusa Regia fade into memory, our journey leads west once again, toward the edge of Europe itself. Here, the land ends abruptly in towering cliffs that plunge into the restless Atlantic Ocean. Winds roar across barren limestone, waves crash hundreds of feet below, and perched on the very brink of this dramatic landscape stands one of Ireland's most enigmatic prehistoric monuments. It is known as Dún Angasa, or Dún Angus, a stone fortress whose true purpose has remained a subject of debate for generations. The approach to the site is almost as memorable as the monument itself. Located on the largest of the Aran Islands, Inishmore, Dun Angus occupies a spectacular position atop sheer cliffs rising nearly 100 meters above the sea. There are no protective railings at the cliff's edge. Beyond the final stone walls lies only open sky and the endless Atlantic, stretching toward a distant horizon where sea and clouds merge into one. Standing here, it feels as though the fortress was built at the very boundary between the human world and something far older. The wind never truly stops. It whistles through gaps in the ancient masonry, carries the scent of salt across the limestone plateau, and echoes against walls that have watched countless storms pass over these cliffs. Even today, despite the steady flow of visitors, the place possesses an undeniable solitude. Whoever chose this location understood its power. Archaeologists believe the earliest construction at Dun Angus began sometime around 1100 BC, during the Late Bronze Age, although the site continued to evolve for centuries afterward, with additional walls and modifications made well into the Iron Age. Rather than representing a single building project, the fortress reflects generations of rebuilding and adaptation. Its layout is striking. 4 massive semicircular stone walls surround the hilltop, while the cliffs themselves form the natural defense on the western side. The outermost wall encloses a broad area, and each successive wall narrows toward the center, creating multiple defensive layers that would have made any direct assault exceptionally difficult. Yet the most unusual defensive feature lies just beyond the outer wall. Covering the rocky ground is a vast field of jagged limestone slabs deliberately planted upright in the earth. Archaeologists refer to this feature as a chevaux de frise, a barrier designed to slow attackers by forcing them across a dangerous maze of sharp stones. Unlike later wooden stakes or metal obstacles used in medieval warfare, these limestone spikes were carved directly from the surrounding landscape. The result is both practical and strangely unsettling. Walking through them even today requires careful footing. To an advancing force, they would have posed a serious challenge. At first glance, the purpose of Dun Angus seems obvious. A fortress, a place of defense, a refuge against attack. Its thick stone walls, commanding position, and elaborate obstacles all support this interpretation. For many archaeologists, this remains the most convincing explanation. Communities living on the Atlantic coast undoubtedly faced conflicts over land, resources, and influence. Elevated fortifications provided protection during periods of instability while also demonstrating political authority. Yet the more closely researchers study Dun Angus, the more complicated that explanation becomes. One immediate question concerns its location. Although the cliffs provide magnificent natural defenses, they also create significant practical challenges. Fresh water is limited. Agriculture is difficult on the exposed limestone landscape. Supplying a large permanent population would have required considerable effort. Was this truly a settlement occupied year-round? Or did people gather here only during particular seasons? Excavations have uncovered evidence of domestic activity, including hearths, animal bones, pottery fragments, and tools suggesting periods of occupation. However, the archaeological record does not clearly indicate the presence of a large permanent population throughout its history. Perhaps the fortress served multiple purposes. It may have functioned as both a defensive refuge and a ceremonial center, changing roles as circumstances evolved over generations. The relationship between military necessity and ritual significance remains one of the site's enduring mysteries. Another intriguing aspect is the remarkable engineering displayed throughout the monument. The builders shaped enormous limestone blocks into carefully fitted dry stone walls that have survived for nearly 3,000 years without mortar. Some sections still stand several meters high despite centuries of exposure to Atlantic storms. Constructing such walls required exceptional craftsmanship. Each stone had to be selected, positioned, and balanced with precision. The fortress demonstrates not only practical engineering, but also a sophisticated understanding of structural stability. The Aran Islands offered abundant limestone, yet transforming raw stone into monumental architecture demanded patience, planning, and organized labor. Who coordinated these projects? Did local chieftains command the workforce? Did entire communities participate in construction as a shared undertaking? Or did specialized builders travel between settlements, carrying techniques perfected over generations? No written records survive to answer these questions. The monument itself remains the only witness. The fortress also raises broader questions about the society that created it. Late Bronze Age Ireland possessed no centralized kingdom comparable to Rome or Egypt. Instead, the island consisted of numerous regional communities connected through trade, kinship, and occasional conflict. Despite this decentralized world, impressive monuments continued to appear across the landscape. Stone forts, ceremonial enclosures, burial monuments, standing stones. Together, they suggest communities capable of organizing surprisingly ambitious construction projects. Perhaps Dun Aengus represented more than local defense. Some archaeologists believe it functioned as an important regional gathering place where neighboring groups met to exchange goods, negotiate alliances, settle disputes, and celebrate seasonal ceremonies. Its dramatic location would certainly have reinforced its symbolic importance. Standing above the Atlantic, visitors could scarcely forget where they were. The sea itself introduces another fascinating possibility. Although modern visitors often imagine the fortress facing an empty ocean, prehistoric coastlines supported active maritime travel. Boats connected communities throughout Western Ireland and beyond. Rather than marking the edge of the known world, Dun Aengus may have overlooked one of its busiest highways. Approaching from the sea, the massive stone walls would have appeared high above the cliffs, creating an unforgettable impression. Was this intentional? Did the fortress announce power to travelers arriving by boat? Or was its position chosen for reasons extending beyond defense and visibility? Some researchers suggest that the western horizon itself carried symbolic meaning. Across many ancient cultures, the setting sun became associated with death, transition, and journeys into unknown realms. At Dun Aengus, every evening the sun disappears directly into the Atlantic beyond the cliffs. Was this coincidence? Or did the builders deliberately choose a place where land, sea, and sky converged in such dramatic fashion? No archaeological evidence provides a definitive answer. Yet the location continues to inspire reflection. The monument's name adds another layer of mystery. Dún Aongasa translates roughly as the Fort of Angus, referring to a legendary figure from Irish tradition. According to medieval legends recorded many centuries after the fortress was built, Angus was a powerful ruler associated with the islands. Whether these stories preserve distant memories of real historical figures remains impossible to determine. The legends appeared long after the original builders had vanished. Still, ancient monuments often become woven into later folklore. Communities rarely allow remarkable places to remain without stories. Among more speculative interpretations, Dun Aengus has attracted considerable attention. Some writers propose that the fortress occupied a sacred position within a wider ceremonial landscape extending across the Aran Islands. Nearby prehistoric monuments, ancient field systems, and ritual sites suggest long-term human activity throughout the region. Perhaps the fortress formed only one element within a much larger network of sacred places. Others focus upon possible astronomical alignments. Certain entrances and wall orientations have prompted suggestions that important solar events influenced aspects of the design. While these ideas remain debated, they reflect a broader pattern observed throughout prehistoric Europe, where monuments frequently acknowledge the movements of the sun and moon. Mainstream archaeology approaches such claims carefully, Not every alignment proves intentional. Nevertheless, prehistoric builders repeatedly demonstrated close attention to celestial cycles. Whether Dun Angus participated in that tradition remains uncertain. Another enduring mystery concerns what once stood inside the fortress. Most visible structures have disappeared entirely. Wooden buildings, roofs, storage facilities, and ceremonial spaces would have decayed long ago, leaving only stone foundations behind. The fortress we see today is therefore incomplete. Its most important features may have vanished centuries ago. Without them, interpreting the remaining walls becomes far more difficult. Even the cliffs themselves conceal unanswered questions. Constant Atlantic erosion has gradually consumed portions of the coastline. Geological studies indicate that the cliff edge has retreated significantly over thousands of years. Was the fortress originally farther inland? Or have sections of the monument already collapsed into the sea? If so, valuable archaeological evidence may now rest beneath the Atlantic waves, forever beyond excavation. It is a reminder that archaeology does not simply lose information through human activity. Nature is equally relentless. As evening approaches, golden sunlight spreads across the limestone plateau before fading into cool shades of gray. The Atlantic below continues its endless rhythm, waves striking the cliffs exactly as they did when the first builders carried stones to this remarkable place nearly 3,000 years ago. The fortress remains silent. Its walls still guard the cliff's edge. Its purpose, however, continues to invite debate. Was Dun Angus primarily a military stronghold built to withstand enemies? A ceremonial center where communities gathered beneath open skies? A symbol of authority overlooking vital sea routes? Or perhaps it was all of these at different moments in its long history. Whatever its original role, the monument has outlived the people who raised its walls, the language they spoke, and the beliefs that shaped their world. Yet it still commands the landscape with quiet confidence, refusing to surrender all of its secrets. And perhaps somewhere beneath the limestone, beneath the fallen walls, or beneath the waves that have slowly claimed the cliff's edge, there are still undiscovered traces of the lives once lived here, waiting for the moment when another forgotten piece of Dun Angus finally emerges from the silence of time.